But I mean, we got a great group here, let's face it. We're so lucky to be in St. Paul with such a strong arts and culture community. So we'll get started here. We are going to record today's grantee orientation so that we can post it on our website and make sure that anybody who can't join us today is able to get the information to be successful in meeting their grant requirements. So heads up on that. And yeah, we'll just get started on this orientation today. So welcome everybody. My name's Nora Riemenschneider. I'm the Cultural Star Coordinator for the City of St. Paul. And I'm joined by my colleague, Grace Bubel, who I think she'll just wave. She's a little under the weather. And I don't know, it's up to you, Grace, but your voice is a little rough, so.
I'll say hello and welcome to everyone. Congratulations on receiving your grant, and I am excited to work with most of you.
Yeah, so Grace has been with our program for about a year and with the city for 3 years. And she works with a good majority of the grantees on your grant agreements and your payment requests and all that good stuff. So a lot of you will get to know Grace, and she's a great resource and really knows how the program works and can answer any questions that you might have and work through any challenges that might come up. So, and yeah, I'll just echo Grace and say congratulations to everybody. We're super excited about this round of grantees and excited to dig into just hopefully making the grant process as simple as possible to allow you to focus on the more important work of developing really exciting arts programming and strengthening your organizations. So yeah, let's jump in here. We're going to go over just the 2 types of contract, which is almost all of our projects, special projects and organizational development. So these are our arts activities and activities to strengthen and grow organizations. If you happen to be one of the few capital projects that we awarded funding to, your process is different and we will work with you probably one-on-one, or maybe we can do an orientation, but it's a small group of just 4. So yeah, that's what we'll focus on today. And the thing to know is that we were really late in awarding these grants. So thank you for all of your patience with us in our lengthy decision-making process. But that said, even though these awards were approved by City Council in September, your contract date will still start August 1st of 2022 and go through July 31st of 2023. This is because our guidelines have timeframes that are pre-established, predetermined, and so we even awarded some projects after they had already occurred due to our just delays in these challenging post-pandemic times. We're just as challenged by these things as everyone and just got delayed. So that's good news if anybody was confused about that. And just to go over, we awarded, let's see, I believe 49 projects this round. And so each of the projects, your organizations will have a CIV number, which is an internal number. We've got a spreadsheet. Maybe I'll just click over to that for a moment so that you can get a feel for what that information contains. So you'll all have gotten this in an email today, but it's also available on our website. And these are numbers that you'll want to reference and just some information that you'll want to have that pertains to some of the requirements. So you'll have your number that identifies your organization, a star number. So we've got 22 is the year, and then 5 means it was round 1. So everybody has a 500 number. And then the account number is where your money comes from in our budget. Your organization, your project name, what type of project it is. For a lot of you, it's really important if you were in or out of the cultural district. If you got a cultural district award where it says in the cultural district. Even if your location changes or something changes about your project, if it's a cultural district project, you have to stick with the downtown project. So we have run into some challenges with that, and we'll work with you if that comes up for you. And then your award amount, and last, your project manager. So Grace and I are on the call today, and a lot of you will be working with you directly. And then some of you will work with Nancy Vang, who's our other colleague, and she couldn't be here today. She's on vacation this week. And when you go to the bottom, the second page rather, you'll see our contact information is down at the bottom. So we try to be easy to reach and just very accessible. So that's a little overview of key information that you'll want to remember. So go back to our presentation today. Oh, and I just want to say too that this is a group of, you know, we're all in the arts community, we're all in the St. Paul community. We just get to know each other, and if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, this is a really, you know, we're doing this presentation to help you and to make sure that you have the information you need. So please feel free to put a question in the chat, which you can see up at the top banner, or raise your hand with the little raise hand reaction, or simply just come off mute and say, oh, excuse me, I have a question, you know, at any time. And I'll be sure to ask if you have questions too. And for those of you, most of you have received Cultural Star grants in the past, so we'll really be kind of going over probably things that you've come across before, although it might have been a couple of years. Nobody remembers anything that happened before the pandemic, so that's for sure. And we have some changes and some things to be aware of, but nothing drastic. So I just want to make sure you're all aware of that too. So yeah, just to continue with our first steps in the contracting process, that'll trigger your 80% advance. And we're going to go over all the details of how to get under contract or to get your grant agreement set up with the city. The first thing to know is that there is a big change in our expectations around timing. We are really going to be enforcing contracts being executed before your project takes place. We have been quite lenient in the past, but you know, our current leadership just really wants to see that there's urgency and a desire to commit to getting these funds and doing the project that you've committed to. And they really want to see that contracts are executed before your project takes place. So what that means is that if your public event is in November, we really want you to have your grant agreement set up before November. And we'll go over all the steps that are required to do that. Looks like Monica wants to weigh in with a question. Hi, Monica. So jump off mute and let us know what your question is.
Okay, I didn't realize I could unmute myself. Thank you. My question is, when we applied for the grant, we had a timeline on our project, and our project was actually for October, the beginning of October. So according to the proposal, would we still be able to execute? I mean, the project's a go. We'll have to like work immediately to get this agreement in place. But I just wanted to name that from the time of application and submission and proposal, dates have been, you know, already there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And we are really flexible with these early projects because of the delays that we had on our end, that were pretty bad delays. So if your project has already taken place, or if it takes place really immediately, like October, early November, we would just be looking to see a good faith effort, that you're working with us and that you're seeing that you have paperwork that would be needed. There are some things that kind of become a little more critical, mostly the insurance certificate and the fact that you'd want to have that in place before an event takes place, in case any claims come up from your event. So the timing of that is pretty important. But we would just, like I said, want to see an effort being made that you'd like to try to have your contract going before your event takes place. And if it's, like I said, some events have already taken place, and we'll just work with you on that. And assuming that you will just be able to close out around the same time as getting under contract because your project's taken place, we will feel that the 80% advance is not needed. The purpose of the 80% advance is to get money into your pocket so that you can use it for your costs. So if it's completely done, your project is done, then we would assume that you don't need the 80% advance and you'll close out right away. If your project is like extended and part of it takes place right away and part of it takes place later, then of course we would still do the advance. But the advance is just kind of irrelevant if your project is done, like really complete. For all projects, there's a hard cutoff date of March 7th, 2023, and that's 6 months after city council approval. So our guidelines, it's like the super fine print, but it says that you have 6 months to execute the contract up after the city council approves it. And so that's kind of our like, you really have to have your contract executed by then. So this would be any projects that take place in March or later. You still have to be under contract before March 7th. And what's good about that is that you will get the 80% advance. Those funds will be in your account and you'll be able to be expending them on grant related expenses. And I see there's a hand up, Pavan.
Yes.
You go by something else, so I apologize for not having your name right if I got it wrong.
No, that's correct. I represent the Indian Music Society of Minnesota. We are a first-time recipient. So quick question, assuming I can get the paperwork into you for the contract, what's sort of the turnaround time before we can deem the contract signed and in place?
Our turnaround time is about 2 weeks from receiving paperwork that's ready to go.
Okay, our event is in November, mid-November, so I think we have enough time, but we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
Okay, and like I said, I mean, we would just be looking for efforts, seeing that you're working on it. And we know that we might have questions about your statement of work, you might have questions, and we want to leave time for that. But if we see that you're working with us.
Thank you.
And so before we get ahead of ourselves, I would like to go into what is involved in getting under contract to clear up any overwhelmingness about that. And that's here. We basically have two things that we require, maybe a third if you're new to receiving city funding. So we have a statement of work form that in a lot of ways just is a lot like the application. You know, you outline your timeline, the location of your project, and a budget of what you end up choosing exactly what line items of your project or the categories that you want to use the Cultural Star funds for. And you also let us know the final amount of your matching funds. And the reason that we do a statement of work is that our application was due back in April, and we know that the final details of your project might have changed slightly. So we do want to give you a chance to give us kind of the final dates, the final budget, your final decisions on what you're going to charge to the grant. And you may have received an amount that was less than what you asked for. So, you know, you kind of want to be able to let us know how the new budget, the final budget amount has impacted your scope and what exactly you're going to be using the funds for. And of course, we do look for the same intent and purpose as you applied for, but you know, some of those details might have changed. And then we also require that insurance is that you would get general commercial liability insurance that covers the city of St. Paul as an additional insured as it relates to this grant. And so that's a form. We have a sample form on our website that you can download and use to show your insurance broker in order to get the right coverage. And I see that Stephanie's hand is up.
Yeah, you might have just answered it. So sometimes the city or the county or whoever has very specific language you want on that certificate of insurance. And so you're saying that there's a place I can download that?
Yep, on our website where we've linked to it a couple times in the emails to the grantees, and I'll also show it to you in a moment.
Okay.
We have a sample form, and the description has specific language that you would tell the, oh, thanks, Grace, she put a link in the chat, that you would tell to your insurance agent, so that you're basically adding City of St. Paul just for the purposes of this contract. So it helps to make sure that it's just about the Cultural Star contract and not like every line of business that you do. So look for that. And then we do need a W-9 form if you have not gotten funding from the City of St. Paul before, or if you changed addresses or your organization name or something like that has changed. But if you've received a grant from us recently, you're all set in our system and we know how to pay you. So we don't need your W-9. Just to go into some like good practices to have around your statement of work. And I think what I'll do is we can go to the statement of work as a document and I can share it with you. Just have to find it here. I don't think I have so many windows open and then suddenly I can't find the right one. Okay, here we go. So the statement of work, like I said, it's a lot of information we already have. It's easy for you to provide to us. Just gonna zoom out a little bit. Your project location, whatever you've nailed down, that might have not have been a detail that you had worked out specifically when you applied. We've made our budget table here slightly more complicated because we want to highlight what your one-to-one match is. So if you were awarded $5,000, you would put that in the first box and you would put $5,000 in the next box. And then the difference, anything else that you're going to be contributing to your project in addition to that, and then a grand total at the bottom. The reason for this is that we only require that you prove to us, and we'll get into this with the closeout information, that you achieved your one-to-one match. And we'll ask you to document that you achieved the one-to-one match. We don't ask you anything in addition that you fundraised and had that contributed to your project. You don't need to prove, but it is helpful for us to see the whole scope of this specific project. So we do ask for the information, but you only have to list your one-to-one match as its own thing. And that we just want to clarify that. There's a lot of projects where we're giving a $10,000 grant and you've got, of course, a one-to-one match, but actually your project is, $100,000 or $200,000. We are contributing very little to your project. So we just don't want to, we don't want it to be confusing or misleading that we would require you to show your whole project budget when our requirement is one-to-one match. That's all we need you to show us at the end of your project. So that's why we're highlighting it that way here. Excuse me. The next section is just going to be a quick summary of your whole project, as well as just a statement about how you're going to use the dollars, which we'll also see on your budget. The timeline, we would ask for your public event, whatever date that you're going to be putting something on that people can go see or do. And then your timeline about planning, the things that you had to do to get ready, kind of a general overview. This doesn't have to be very detailed. On page 3 is going to be the project budget. And this is where we really need you to make a decision about which expenses you are going to charge to the STAR grant, to the Cultural STAR grant. And you're going to put that in this column here listed as STAR grant. And our advice is to choose very easy to document and large ticket items, large expenses, large amounts of your budget. Because at closeout time, we're going to ask you to prove every expense that you used the grant money for, which means receipts, invoices, contracts, copies of checks, bank statements. It is a lot of work. And we are working on making it easier, but we're not there yet, so bear with us. Unfortunately, this is still something we require. And it's just, you know, we're kind of a little sticklers about all these items. So the easiest way to deal with that is to choose items that you are easily documenting, like paying your artists might be one. You might have an expense that's really a lot, like renting a stage, and it's $5,000. That right there is huge. You're just going to be able to hand us the receipt for that rental. And the receipt might say that it's a paid, you know, item that you've already paid for, and that's it. That's all the documentation you need. So we really encourage you to think through what's the easiest to document that I can charge to this grant. Grace is very good at helping make these determinations and think through your project because she's worked on both sides of setting up a grant and closing it out. I can help as well. And we just want to try to make it as smooth as possible. The only thing we don't allow you to charge to the grant is food and beverages. So those would go in different categories of your budget. The next column is going to be all of your matching funds, not just the ones that come from Cultural STAR. And that's just in order to keep it more simple. We don't actually need to know what you're using the Cultural STAR or the matching funds for. We're going to look at the revenue side for that. But we do want to know how much, have a good picture of what it takes to put on your project. And then in the last column, you'll total across each row here in the total project amount column. And then you'll also total it each column at the bottom. So that's how the budget works. And then on the last page is going to be where did your matching funds come from? And again, this, you will list all of them here, you know, so even if you have a $5,000 grant, but it costs $100,000 to put it on, you'll list all those other sources, you know, different grants. You can kind of make big categories, like all our grants are giving us 75,000, and I'm kind of making up these numbers, and oh, we're going to have some donations and we think that's going to be 20,000, and you know, kind of whatever your sources are. It might be ticket revenue, it might be grants, it might be sponsorships, it might be vendor fees, you know, kind of a bigger breakdown. And as far as documenting that at the end, we will only ask you to document that one-to-one amount. And we would look for that you received those funds as income or revenue towards your project. So a copy of a grant award letter that totals your matching funds amount, your ticket sales records, a sponsorship agreement, a check that you got from a company to sponsor your event. Maybe you restricted funds to that budget, so you would give us a letter from your board chair or your treasurer or your finance manager, whoever that might be, somebody who kind of tracks these things and knows what money is restricted to which budget categories, that sort of thing. So while we ask for the full budget, we only ever need you to document the things that relate to the one-to-one match amount and the things that you spent the Cultural STAR grant funds on. So that's an overview, another map of the cultural districts. That's helpful for those projects that are in the cultural district. And yeah, that's a quick overview of what that form is all about. And I'll move back to the presentation. And this would be a good time, I think, for questions. So it looks like Monica has another question.
There's someone before me who has a question too. I think.
Oh. Let's see, I don't see other hands. Does anybody want to jump in?
Okay, I thought I saw a hand. My question is related to when you need the documentation for the match awards.
That would come at closeout after your project has taken place and when you want to claim the last 20% of,
Okay, thank you.
of your award amount. So the statement of work, it's kind of a planning document. You really want to think through and anticipate the closeout process when you work on your statement of work. And once you've submitted your statement of work and your insurance certificate to your project manager, we'll take a look at it. We'll let you know if we have questions. And then we start our review process on our side. It takes about a week or two. And then we have an e-signature process now. So that's a little bit easier than it used to be. If anybody worked with us pre-COVID, you had to like get something in the mail, sign it 3 times. Don't do that anymore. And then once we have signed it on our end, which goes pretty quickly as well because of the e-signature process, then from that point on, we submit your 80% advance request to our accounting department, and about 2 weeks later, the check would be cut and mailed. So all in all, I would say it's probably about a month-long process that it would take to get the 80% advance, given all the review and stuff like that. And like I said, really just work with Grace or Nancy or myself on your statement of work if you have questions about how to plan it out. And we can really dig into your specific questions and get a better understanding of your project and make sure we can be helpful.
Nora, I have a question.
Oh, please, yeah. Amanda.
So just to prep my finance team who will have to pull invoices and stuff, the first column will have to provide all of the backup. Is the second column our match? Do we have to provide receipts and everything for that?
No
Okay.
receipts or anything.
Just the
for
first
match.
column. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yeah, the only thing we require on the match is showing us that you received at least the amount of the grant from other sources. And usually that would be another grant award letter. Probably the second most common is restricting organizational funds. And that would be a letter from a finance person or someone on your board who handles that sort of thing. I think that kind of covers this process. If you're a fiscally sponsored group, I don't think we have any of those on the call right now, but basically your grant agreement is with your fiscal sponsor. So it's with Springboard or it's with Film North or whoever else. But we work with the grantee applicant on the documentation usually because they're the ones who know. Our VOP vendor outreach program requirements have gotten pretty simple for the most part. Our vendor outreach is a ordinance of the city of St. Paul that requires especially really large construction projects to use minority, women-owned, and small business enterprises. Those are not my names for things, but that's what they're technically called. And so it's a good, like, intent ordinance. It didn't really fit Cultural Star, and right now our VOP monitor basically has decided that all Cultural Star projects meet VOP based on the intent of what they're trying to do. So that's a good thing. However, if you want to look for vendors that are minority owned or women owned, we have a directory of vendors that have gone through the certification process. And it's a really great resource. So, you're looking for a new printer and you wish to hire a minority owned printer, we have lists for that. So we'll be sure to share that out on our website. It's totally up to you what vendors you use. So yeah, that's about it on the front end. This review process, I've already described, but basically we make sure everything looks good on the statement of work and insurance certificate. We route it. It takes about 2 weeks. Everybody signs everything. Your first 80% advance request form is going to be part of your contract. So you'll sign everything at once, and so will we. So that's why your advance is going to be triggered by getting under contract. So that really moves things along a lot more smoothly. And yeah, the next step would be, you're implementing your project. You're moving forward, you're ready to put on your events or engage with your folks. And so in terms of that stage, we'd really just ask, like Amanda asked a moment ago, like, what do I need to tell my finance people, or what do I need to keep track of? Keeping those documents of the expenses that you plan to charge to STAR, just having your invoices and receipts kind of organized and handy. Making sure that when you are creating your programs and posters and making your social media promotions for your event, that you're putting the STAR logo on it, or promote, letting people know that STAR was part of the support that you got to put on the project. And we have our logo available on that website that we'll show you. And then last, that documentation of your matching funds. Your letter, your sponsorship agreements, whatever it may be. And so then after that comes closeout. So after your project is complete and it's all taken place, then we would start with the heavy documentation parts. This is kind of the painful part of the process, but we are here to help. It's just a lot of documentation, and we're like I said, we're trying to whittle it down, but right now we do still require everything that we've always required. So part of your contracting process will be creating a payment request form that's unique to your project because it's based on your budget. And it reminds everybody what categories you're going to charge the grant to. Those cannot change later. So if you decide to just do artistic personnel, and that's the only category that you were going to use Cultural STAR money for, you can't add marketing or rentals or any other types of categories later on. You have to stick with artistic personnel. It's actually a good idea just to put a couple budget categories to give yourself some flexibility. But you will get a unique payment request form that you'll then use to finalize your 20% request and closeout. Pavan, go ahead. And
yeah, quick question. So let's say you got $20,000 from the Cultural STAR grant, and you're going to release 16,000 upfront. So does that mean I can only spend 16,000 in the beginning, and then, suppose I have artistic personnel listed for 20,000. So can I write them a check for 20,000, or do I wait till you send me the remaining 20% before I pay them out?
You do not have to wait.
Okay.
You can use funds you have on hand.
Okay, got it.
If that's what makes sense for you. When we close out, we'll just be looking that your expenses that you charged to the grant were incurred between August 1st and July 31st.
Got it. Thanks.
And let's see, was there another question from Stephanie?
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say you can't change the categories of expenses after you kind of lock that in.
Mm-hmm.
Can we request a revision to move around money within those expense categories if we need to?
Yes, and we actually don't require that you request a revision. You can just change the amounts. We don't have any like 20% changes or any rules like that. So if you have, artistic personnel and supplies and marketing, and you've allocated certain amounts to them, those amounts can shift at the end, as long as those are the three categories that you are charging the grant to. And in fact, you can just end up only charging one of those categories or two of them. It's very flexible once you've selected the categories that you want to charge the grant to.
Got it. So theoretically, the safest way to do that then, if you have an ongoing project that may shift as it goes, is to put as many categories as possible so that you could mix it around if you needed to.
Yeah, definitely. You can do that. It's a good way to give yourself flexibility later.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So yes, we were talking about the payment request form. It's going to have the cultural star column that you had written on your statement of work as the budget on that form. So you'll be reminded of what categories you can charge to the grant. And for every amount that you're putting down, every charge, we're going to look for 2 documents. Well, sometimes it's just all in one document, but we need documents that tell us both what the expense was for. So that would typically be an artist contract. Then it's clear that your artist is getting paid for this event that you're doing or this project that you're doing. Or it might include receipts or invoices. So it shows us the type of service that you received. You know, what was that expense for? And oftentimes it'll also show us that it was related to the project that you've named, that you're doing, to make it even more crystal clear that the charge that you're paying for was connected to the event or project that your grant is for. And then we also need to see the proof of payment. So that would be like the check that paid the expense, the bank statement that shows that you paid the expense. This is why receipts are great, because a receipt is both an expense document and a payment document. It shows that you're all settled, that you paid the receipt, you paid the charge. So that's definitely the easiest type of expense. And a lot of invoices do that as well, where it's just like the invoice says right on there that they've received payment for it. Or they could give you a receipt that includes the invoice information. Because it's a lot to have to provide both types of proof. And like I've been saying, the expense has to have been incurred between August 1st and July 31st. Looks like we've got a question about this in the chat. The contract and the proof of payment. Oftentimes, if you have an artist contract, it shows what you're going to pay, what the artist can expect to be paid for the work that they're doing. And then later they would get a check for the first installment or the second installment, or maybe they're getting paid at the time of the performance or whatever it might be. So in that case, it would be two different documents. And you would submit both the contract and the copy of the check or the bank statement that says that you paid this person, or your Venmo or PayPal transaction, or however you're paying for them for their contract. So that's a couple of the documents. Next, as we've been talking about, you would show that you had a 1-to-1 match in the form of like a grant award letter, your ticket sales. If it actually is also easier for you to show your expenses instead, we would accept that. So, if your grant is for $5,000 and you had a $10,000 bill for something, then you're showing us both your your grant expenses as well as your matching expenses all in one. And that's an option. It's just not usually very easy to do that in cultural star projects because it's a lot of little expenses. But that's how we do our capital grants and that sort of thing. Looks like we have Stephanie, another question.
You can tell we're first-time grantees, right? We have lots of questions.
No problem.
So one of the other things that we do is we work with youth experiencing homelessness, and we incentivize their participation in different programs with gift cards. And we do receipting for that. Would that count as like proof of payment? Like, so if we buy the gift cards, we got a receipt, do you then also want to see that the client got the gift card? Do you want a copy of that receipt from the client?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
the way we've done gift cards before is that the purchase of the gift card meets both requirements.
Right.
Because we've had, artists get paid with gift cards before, or not usually artists, but like participants, or, that would be like the honoraria.
Yeah.
So I think we've come across that before, and I think it's as easy as that.
We have them, so we could do it either way. It's just a lot less having to sort them out into a pile for you versus other people if we don't need it. So that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will double check on that. And I'll just make a note of it, but I think it should be pretty straightforward. Receipts. Okay, so we've kind of gone over how to show that you had the one-to-one match. Also the credit, so you'll provide to us just one copy of something that had the logo on it or the credit that you gave to Cultural Star funding in whatever format that is. You might have had a bunch of promotional materials that listed our logo, so thank you for that, but you only need to show us one version. I note here applicable compliance reporting, but we really have minimized that, so it's not really relevant to most. And the last thing is that there's a final report that's in the Zoom grant system that you use to apply for the funds. It's pretty straight, it's really short, it's just 5 questions. And it's really related to, you know, how did it go compared to what you had planned for. And that information is really helpful to us. But feel free to keep it pretty brief and high level. Oh, and I do want to say that all these items, there's a, within the final report on Zoom grants, you can upload all of these documents and just do a one-stop kind of process to do your closeout. I had mentioned compliance, but like I said, it's the only thing I really like to say about it at this point is that we have a way to find vendors if you're interested. Last, just, you know, where to go to find all this information. Our website's easy to find, stpaul.gov/culturalstar, or just go to stpaul.gov and use the little magnifying glass to search for Cultural Star. And from there, it's the information for Cultural Star grant recipients. And that webpage is really dedicated to, you know, this video will be posted there. We'll have the slides up there. We'll have all the documents that you need, like the statement of work, the sample insurance certificate. You know, all of those details will be posted. Oh, the logo is downloadable from there. All that information is available on the website. And last, Zoom grants, you'll go back into Zoom grants, which you're familiar with from applying for the funding, to complete your final report and upload all your documents to close out at the end. So, and then of course, Grace and I are here today for questions. We work with Nancy as well, so some of you might be working with Nancy, and we're just really accessible. You know, every project is really different, so it can get a little tricky. And, you know, we do our best to answer your questions and be a resource. So with that, I think I've covered everything that I plan to cover, and I'd just be open to any questions, concerns. I think that might be it. I'm trying to think if there's any projects right around the corner that people want to check out. Pavan, do you want to put in a plug for your concert?
Sure, we have a 2-time Grammy Award-winning, pretty much a world-famous artist performing at the Fitzgerald Theatre on November 12th. His name is Zakir Hussain. He's a maestro of the tabla, which is the predominant percussion instrument in North India, and he will be performing with a young maestro of the sitar, which is a stringed instrument. His name is Niladri Kumar. So we are very happy that the St. Paul Cultural Star is funding this really special project that marks 40 years of the Indian Music Society here in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Wow, that sounds great. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Oh yes, Tyler just had Frogtown Arts Festival. We also just missed Marydale Festival, which was this past weekend. Anybody else want to put in any shameless plugs?
I've got one for I'm with the American Craft Council. We are having our marketplace American Craft Made at the St. Paul River Center, and that will be October 7th, 8th, and 9th. So very soon.
Awesome. Does it cost, is there a ticket price to entry?
There is a ticket price for entry, and and it's also free for members of ACC. So you can check out craftcouncil.org for more info, or feel free to reach out to me too if you have questions.
Awesome. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, the American Craft Council, it's a nationwide group, and they relocated to the Twin Cities a couple years back from New York. So it's pretty cool to have a big prominent organization that calls Minnesota home, and that St. Paul is a big craft event for them. And I think it's pretty regional, isn't it? It draws a lot of people from across different states.
Yeah. So of course there's, Minnesota vendors and Minnesota partners that we focus on, but there will be artists from all over the country that will be just right downtown.
Yeah, great. Super exciting. Anybody else want to say that you've got something coming up?
I'll jump in. I'm Lana with MISNA. It's not cultural star funded, but our Twin Cities Arab Film Fest opens on Wednesday at the Walker, and the rest of the fest is at the Trilon Cinema, both in Minneapolis. Should be an incredible time. We have a couple of visiting filmmakers from Lebanon and from somewhere in Europe. And the films are really incredible. Many different genres. Our curators have been working hard, and it should be a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, it has a lot of acclaim. And someday maybe you'll be able to do some screenings in St. Paul as we expand our film resources.
I think that day is coming.
I'm very optimistic. We are filming. One of our grantees this round is the Film North Cinema. They've bought a building on University just across from MISNA's offices in the Creative Enterprise Zone, and there will be about a 50-seat state-of-the-art cinema in their center. So it's a really good size for more, an intimate setting for film, which will be a huge resource for the Twin Cities.
Yes, I've heard about that. It's really exciting.
And oh yes, Victoria Theater. We can't forget Victoria Theater is going to be coming online soon as well as another venue on University. So, are you guys going to have film too at Victoria Theater, Tyler? Okay, good to know. I don't know if you know
we
that,
sure
Lana,
are. We sure are. We'll have the ability to show film and yeah, we've got a 100-seat flexible performance space that will embrace anything we can throw at it. So
awesome. All right, everybody. Ooh, Free First Sunday at the Children's Museum coming up on October 2nd. Not funded by Cultural Star. I think it's Securian, right? Your guys' funder. So that's coming up.
I will say the museum has kind of a sad lull as kids go back to school. So if you have a weekday off, now is the time to bring your kiddos to the museum.
Yeah, good. That's a great point.
Field trips don't start until usually October as kids settle in. So September during the week is the time to come when you don't have any competition for playing areas.
Oh, great. And we've got a plug from the street facing exhibit in our minds. And it really is amazing to go downtown and see art in the windows. It's just beautiful and wonderful to see. They've done a great job making them. It's like just so accessible because it's right there on Robert Street and is it 4th Street, I think. And in the Skyways as well. All right, well, this was a fun part of the session. And with that, I think we'll end a little early. We got everything covered. All other questions can come straight to us and just be in touch. We're excited to participate in everything across St. Paul. And have a great rest of the day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.